it's interesting, decide to, I don't know, Frode, when you decide to kind of make a change, how that's how I ended up in this group, for example. Different people kind of come up and you meet new people and opportunities sort of present themselves. So
Yes,
I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna explore some different areas. I could go anywhere there that I want, and different opportunities, and see what happens.
Are you talking about London?
Yes, yes. She asked why I was moving to the UK.
As long as you're on the Tube network, you're fine. Mark, was that a yawn I saw? Not at all.
Mark, Mark, you had jet lag coming back.
No, I'm back, and I think functional. I was, but myself for the first time ever, actually, I sort of felt a bit jet lagged coming home from Chicago, but I'm back together now.
Well, it was a great pleasure on that Saturday night after I got the house back together and being gone off for a week, and the cat was happy to see me and ate like a pig. Eats for me really well. To open up that bottle of scotch, like a Vullen, oh my God, and have that drink.
Alcohol
After
can be good
it was a hard
sometimes.
week, folks. Just so you'll know, that conference, we were busy I was teaching the summer school, the Hypertext summer school, starting at 8 in the morning, and then I'd get in the Uber and go straight to campus, and then we were there till 5:30, 6 o'clock. There was an event at night, so it was a 12-hour day for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 5 days, and then came home and got in. It was like 10 hours on Friday. I was pretty beaten up. That's a lot of work. And we have Carl here today. Carl, hello, darling. Hello, everybody. Good to see everyone.
It's a good crew. I got an email from Ken that he cannot make it today. He's on a flight, but hello, everyone else.
Yeah, two Peters.
Double Peter.
Double Peter.
Double Peter. Yeah, Pete and repeat.
Yeah, I'm not going to wonder which one's which, though. Oh yeah, see, Peter Demetrius is also braving the outside. Here, it's really nice when the sun is out, and then it's not nice. So anyway, we'll see what we can do. So today we'll be reviewing Mark and Dene's experience in Chicago, and then we'll talk about going further and all kinds of good stuff. Dene or Mark, who should kick off? I don't know.
Well, I'd like to start by saying that Mark and I are still putting our material together. He sent me his so just to let you know, we had the testing for 14 people during the conference, anywhere from 20 minutes to sometimes longer over the course of the week, right? We started on Tuesday, ended on Thursday. 14 people, a variety of different, ranks, ages, experiences. The data was great data. So Mark was taking notes as I was walking him through the headset experience, the script that we devised. And then Mark would step in and add material to that. So we had two people talking, helping the user, taking notes, and me handling all the tech, right? So it was a really great plan that we had, and it worked well. But we have lots of observations that we captured. And what we're trying to do is pull it into some sort of like meta comments instead of saying, here's what Jamie Bluestein said. Here's what Mark Bernstein said. Here's what Marius Pozarski said. So we have that in the notebook. But rather than the tedious comments of one by one, putting them together as kind of global comments. Does that make sense to everybody? Ultimately, what's going to happen is we're going to take the questions and the script that we put together for this testing and the formal report that I'm putting together right now, and we'll have on Wednesday, and that will be submitted to the Sloan Foundation, showing that we did and do testing, which is part of our grant, right? We have to show that we've done this. So very formal. The next phase, Frode is taking this project to an event in Austria. He has about a month-ish to get it wrapped up and ready to go. And that will be less formal. It'll be one person letting people demo it. Then the next time we experience it will be at the Future of Tech Symposium, and it will be in a little bit more polished format so that all that's left is just kind of final tweaks. The grant is over in December, so we want to have everything pulled together so that I spend December writing the final report, which would be about 40, 50 pages by the time we're done with all the appendices and stuff. So that's where we are in the project. And so I guess my question is what, you know, in this preliminary moment where I don't have a formal report, do you want me to walk you through some of the comments that were made, some of the more global experiences?
Personally, I think that would be great, Dene. You mentioned a few things to me before our main meeting here, and it made me wonder, there will be things that definitely needs to be tweaked and polished, but there may also be cases where it does actually work really well, but people don't know this world yet. So it'll be an interesting discussion over time to figure out, you know, we don't want to over optimize for new users. We want to optimize for the people who spend a little bit of time, you know, that whole age old thing. Hi, Tom. Yeah, Dene, if no one has anything else, I think that would be super lovely.
And Mark is going to chime in because he took all the notes and he's been writing it out for me. I do want to say that the people that we tested were all colleagues. And what's really nice about academe, what I prefer, what I like about it, is that people can be critical and still be kind. I don't expect for me to show something to somebody and they go, oh, that's so wonderful, I love it, and then walk away and go, God, that sucked, right? I want people to say, this works and here's why it doesn't when it doesn't, right? In a kind way, in a way that's helpful. Because the point of academe, for those of you who have never been in academe, is that you do something to move the ball forward, right? You're edging the ball forward, and then someone else takes that ball and edges it a little further. And if over the course of time, we can make some good change. Change doesn't usually happen like this. That scientific paradigm that Kuhn talks about in his book is rare, right? What really happens in academe is a slow, meticulous, step-by-step process of looking at something, thinking about it, critiquing it, finding all the ways to break it, and then accepting it and moving it forward, right? It's a long process. And so you get feedback that maybe you don't want to hear, like, this doesn't work for me, or I don't like the way this looks, and that we can say, oh my God, you're attacking me. No, that's not how academe works. And these people know this. So when they made comments, they did it from their heart as a way to help us move the ball forward. So I'm going to say that before I say anything else. Frode's hands up.
I just want to add to how important it is what Dene's saying. There's something that came to me yesterday, because this is part academe and part design. And Pixar, the animation company, they have this really great process where when they're working on a movie, on a specific scene, they'll bring people into the room and say, what should we do more? What can we do better? It's called plussing. It's a very, very positive attitude. So as we go forward, now that we have something really nice and solid, it's going to be really nice to enjoy. So if someone entirely disagree with where we're going, that's okay. But now we're at the plussing stage as well. So just, you know, the attitude Dene's talking about, yes, we have a wonderful group. Everyone here is out of their own free will. No one is compensated to be here. So yeah, it was just really heartening to hear how that went in Chicago, and I look forward to that continuing. I know I'm just repeating, but it had to be said from England as well. Dene, please continue.
So some of the people that I thought would be very, very critical were very polite and had some I thought positive ways of explaining their critiques. So there was nothing said that I didn't disagree with and I felt hurt by. So Mark, I'm going to just go through some of these things that we wrote down, and then you can add to it because you have quite a bit in that Slack channel that I'll move into this text, right? So let me start with just a general thing. When you're in how many of you have never been in XR before? Anybody in this room ever never been in XR? Okay, when you're in an XR environment and you're interacting with objects, you can't really.
Dene, there's a question here about the sound volume. You're a little quiet for me, but Tom is saying you're quite quiet for him. Do you have an opportunity to increase it somehow? I don't know.
Better? Is that better?
Tom, is it better for you?
About the same. Yeah. You're
trouble?
quieter than usual. Let's just say that. I don't know if you've played with your mic setting or something. No? Okay.
Can anybody else have trouble with me?
Frode, I can hear just fine, but you're about a a couple decibels lower than him.
Mark,
That's all.
can you hear me, Mark?
I can hear you all right. You're definitely coming across softer than some of the other other boxes.
Okay. All right. I'll stop talking and I'll figure out what's going on. Somebody else talk for a while.
Dene, let's just say if you,
Yeah.
obviously go in system panel, whatever, system settings and sound, right?
I'm looking at it now. Yes, I know how to do this. Anybody else? Does that help at all?
It's if the Zoom settings, as opposed to the OS settings, under audio, you should be able to, I think, put in a bit of audio boost for the output volume slider at the top.
Yeah, watch for the noise removal settings. Sometimes those can,
That makes sense.
the auto stuff gets in the way and does stupid things.
But
you can always set the levels, man.
No, the noise removal, you're absolutely right. That can cut way too much.
I mean, original sound for musicians kind of does you hear everything. Not good if you have kids in the background.
Okay,
Or birds. I got birds going like nuts here.
Is that any better? I'll just talk louder. How about that? Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just yell.
That works too.
Okay.
Just want to make sure
All right.
people can hear you on the recording. That's
I'm
all.
so happy. Okay, so let me go ahead. So once again, when you're inside of XR environment and you're interacting with objects, right? We can't really touch the object. Our hand goes through them. We think we're touching something and we're not. It's hard to gauge. So the thing we have to think about is feedback, user feedback. So we have that with the keyboard. The keyboard, when you touch the keyboard keys, they light up and there's a sound. That makes sense. But when they touch the knowledge object, that's the document, the article, and they put their finger and they're going to grab a word or phrase or a sentence, there's no feedback. And so we found people doing this and we couldn't get them to stop doing that because they couldn't figure out if they were actually evoking anything. So it's about evoking something and letting people know what they've done. So one suggestion would be to, when they pinch the word or the phrase, because it's going to be highlighted in gray anyway, it immediately highlights in gray as they touch it, and that lets them know that they've done it. So that's one thing to think about, is how we get some feedback in the environment, right? It was helpful when they went from the meta experience into the ante room. They could look up and see our title over their head. They knew they were in somewhere different. The room changed, right? Then when they touch the sphere on their wrist, the scene changed again and went gray. So they knew then something happened, right? So that kind of design really is helpful. The second thing that we noticed was that we had 3 cards available for them to interact with, of all the ones that Mark has, prepared, right? Of all the Hypertext 24 papers, we had 3 that were ready to be played with in this environment. And we can only use the right hand. We were not switching back and forth. So I'm left-handed, I had to use my right hand. So I'm doing this to the cards. There's the card, there's the words that go with the card, right? The title. And even though I'm standing there, it's like teaching school. Please don't do this. Please touch this. And they're doing something totally different. Oh, I didn't know you meant that. Oh, you meant the card. Like, yes, the card. And so, to interact with the card, they have to move their hand like this. So it's a very unusual gesture. And touch the blue dot on the left-hand side of the card, pull it out, and then drop it, unpinch it, right? And so inevitably, with the exception of a handful of people kept grabbing the words, the title, and going, what do I do with this? No, that's not the card. The card is the little white thing next to that. Can you grab that? So what I recommend we do is get rid of all that other stuff that goes with the card and just put the card. I also recommend that when we do that, the blue dot that allows us to move the card is on the right-hand side of the card for right-handed people and on the left-hand side for left-handed people when we get to the switching of the hands. So there's only the 3 cards, no text, the blue dot on the side of the card, pull that out, and then let it go. right? Let it go. The other thing that happened is that there was some confusion. What I had imagined for my own self, if I was doing this by myself and had my own team, I would be very consistent about what these gestures and shape language objects represent. As you know, I love the cube, right? I mean, I love the sphere. I think that's great. And I think that should be, this is how you get into the environment. This is how you leave the environment, in, out, right? The cube was very confusing for people. And the first thing I would have them do is put your hands in front of you and look at what you've got. And they would start doing this immediately. Say, no, don't touch anything. Bam, they're gone. And I'd have to like start over again, right? So look, put your hands out. Don't touch anything. Just look. What do you see? And all the time they would look at that cube. They go, why is that cube translucent? Why? I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. This isn't, and this is. So that inconsistency was obvious when we had 14 people looking at it. And if the cube is going to be our container in the VR space, then having it on our wrist makes no sense. So to me, the sphere is how you interact with the environment, and the cube is the objects in the container in the environment, and the mana menu, which is the menu that's on your hand, is the very menu for interacting with the objects in that knowledge space, whether it's a 3D object, piece of text, or what. So in and out, inside the space, interacting with objects. And that kind of consistency becomes intuitive very quickly, all right? What other stuff here? The exit didn't work. So I suspect, I found when I cleaned out the cache before every visitor, every user, that then they can exit. And the exit was supposed to be touch the cube, or there's the exit that they can, interact with. None of that worked for several of the users. So we had to just take the headset off and had to start it all over again. I reset everything from scratch. So, so there's some things there that need to be kind of cleaned up. So moving forward, what I'd recommend would happen if this was like I said, once again, this was my project and I had my own team and I was moving forward with all this good data, right? And this isn't everything. Mark's got even more to talk about. I would clean up these elements first, right? Get some interaction in that environment, clean up the environment a bit, get rid of some of those, you just have the cards. Also, when they typed on the keyboard, they didn't know where to look for the words. And only 2 people of 14 looked on the left-hand side of the keyboard and saw it on the left-hand side towards the ground. And so they're like looking around going, where is it? And it was there. So that was interesting to see that happen. So I would figure out a way to spawn that text in a different location. The next step after that would be to get the knowledge cube and the 3 cards inside that cube. And I saw, Fabian, this morning, your video, which was so great, of people being able to put their hand in, pull out the knowledge object, right? And so, I mean, that would be the next step. And then Frode has quite a bit of stuff that he wants to move forward with that I think will work really well too. Let me turn this over to Mark and let him also add to this because he's got a lot of notes too.
I should just typed one note, which is that as I was actually looking at the people doing the work, the one thing that was very, very noticeable is when we did the bit with the keyboard and they pressed enter to basically put the text into the environment, everyone looked to their right, and the placement, Murphy's Law, happened to be down and to the left. Only one person actually spotted it without quite a bit of prompting. So I don't know whether it's just a natural sort of general reaction that one looks to the right, that, there may be some psychological sort of underpinnings that I don't know. But it was quite interesting. That one of the most positive things actually was people really responded, I think, in an unexpectedly positive way to having this text loose in the space. So, funnily enough, making lemonade out of lemons in terms of the difficulty of trying to highlight text and having this extracted text actually is more useful because that's what you want. There was also, I think, pick the words carefully, but I think what chimed with things also we heard in just various talks at the conference of anyone working with text in volume is sort of typeset paginated text is a nightmare, and it's not a good place to start. Now, it's where lots of legacy stuff is now, but for instance, if I was starting again now, I just wouldn't bother with PDF, and I'd pre-process it, but always work with clean. I put it through a cleaner before I put it anywhere near the environment. It just creates extra work because you're getting all sorts of typesetting crap coming in. It's not the full PDF. It was never designed for this purpose, so we have to bear that in mind. But there was a sense too when people opened a document. Some people had difficulty orienting it. If the controls were on the side of the page, that would be more natural. And I know Dene's covered the left-right thing. This sounds like a critique, but I mean, those of us who've been involved in making this environment know how we got here. So it's not unsurprising that some of these things exist because we weren't trying to address those factors. But actually having just seen this in front of people and what was counterintuitive to them. I mean, the classic is if you're trying to orient a piece of paper and you hold it like this, it's actually remarkably uncomfortable and difficult. And the point about the card is if I tell you, as I look at it, that's where the control point is. I can't pinch with my right hand because I wouldn't be able to do that in the real world. So there are little things like this that just flow out quite easily once you start to put in front of people who obviously have no preconception of how the thing works. So I've touched on the text thing, and I think it really reinforces the point Brandel made, 2-3 years ago to us, that you basically want digital text, ideally with some sort of semantic. So something like HTML, doesn't have to be HTML, but XML, whatever, is really the way to go as early as possible in the process. One of the things we did do, it's there in the demo, but we haven't got as far as using is, for instance, we've now got the data with, in fact, its own bibtech. So if you were to use the document knows its own bibtech. So if you pull something out of it, not only will that text know where it's from, it'll actually know how to cite itself from bibtech, which is kind of neat. The thing I think seemed to be people enjoyed the most was the fact that so they could create these bits of text that represented the things they were interested in, and they understood the artificiality of the fact they were essentially picking random text from a source object. But the bit they seemed to strongly internalize without much extra prompt was, okay, so I've taken some annotations, and yes, I may be able to make a small sort of label for this. And the understanding is, nobody in their right mind wants to do long form typing in this environment, which is in this environment, as opposed to a completely different thing. Like if I'm sitting in a train or I'm sitting on a plane, which is a different use case to my mind to this. But if I'm just trying to go in, get annotations, draw together information, I'm going to be doing the long form writing outside XR. Nobody expressed a preference to continue the process inside XR. But definitely the sense was, yeah, this is really useful. I get together stuff I want. I can easily pull it together. I can come back in and out. They understood the end point, which Fabian's done really nicely. So you can either come back and bring in what you've extracted, basically re-enter the environment. Things will be where you put them, and you can carry on. Maybe you just have to take a phone call or something. Plus the fact that you can look at the environment, that you can see a sort of listing of where things are, and the information traveling in and out knows where it came from. So it can be reinserted in the same space, but it also knows not just in terms of XYZ coordinates where it was, but it actually knows the source document from which it's come. Something I think only one person noticed the sort of previous and next buttons which we weren't using in the demo. We didn't encourage people because Fabian made the point that the underlying process to that was a bit laggy, so that was fine. One person did ask, well, where does the red line go if I go to a different page? And that's something to consider. But in fact, if you used a a notional window that scrolled its text, then it would seem to me, and I'm not a programmer, so having a shout at me if I get this wrong, that essentially that if you scroll past the point where it's pointed, will either go to the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen. One of the and something that sort of also falls from that is it might be you would do the reverse. You go to your little annotation, do some gesture to it, so it would scroll itself back into position. Which brings me to another observation that people really weren't trying. They did quickly get the point. They weren't trying to read the text as they would a book. They were looking for something that was of interest and relevance. So what's again is interesting, so it might be that you, to make most of this sort of triage thing, you would want to possibly do some pre-reading. So you've got some idea of what you're looking at, you bring these papers in, and then you do all this cleverness, get the bits you want, assemble them. Well, we've already started talking about more things that you can do with those bits of text. So I see Dean's got a hand up.
Yeah, I want to build on something that you said and also is in the chat. So people did not want to do long form writing in a born virtual space. That was just the bottom line. So the big discovery I think we've made, one of the big discoveries we've made, is that this is a great space for brainstorming, creativity, getting outside your normal environment, and thinking differently and moving things around and using that space to brainstorm. That to me is exactly what this is for. And then to connect with Aya Scott's comment, it'd be interesting to think that you can then shift right out of that into your own space and work, or you can then, some people could put on, I know Frode, you work inside the space in a 2D way by looking at cinema and things like that, right? There's a big movement towards watching film in VR, right? Those kinds of things. The more two-dimensional use of a 3D space, I call it 2.5, right? So shifting from 3 to 2 seamlessly. So you've got this stuff, okay, you're through brainstorming, but you want to stay in VR, bam, here you are. Now you've got your real keyboard and your computer and you're in the space in front of you, right? So there's that. And then also you leave completely and go into your normal physical world. So what I think we want to think about as we move forward, and we could think about how we can leverage this VR space to push that creativity a little bit harder, so that we do provide much more experience with the three-dimensional aspect of the space, and also three-dimensional objects in that space. That's where we really haven't pushed it too hard. That's where we are. I mean, that's where the advantage is for this space. And I'll stop my hand down.
I was going to cover one more thing, and it may be what Tessa got a hand up about, because I saw her question earlier, sort of saying, well, okay, if we don't have a label on the sort of card, how do we know what it is? What was confusing people, only when we said, what do you see? One person said, I see 6 objects. Most people assumed that the label was in fact attached to the card. And I think the answer to your question is, if we need that text, then it should be essentially it should fall out from that essentially that icon. So for instance, you've actually got one knowledge object, an article, with two things representing it in space, which also is confusing. The interesting though, in the context, the other part of the question is, well, how do you know what it is? I was actually surprised by something that perhaps runs counter to some of the discussions we've long had here, that people were very happy with symbolic representation rather than text. Once they knew what something was, they didn't need the text anymore. What they were dealing with were things that represented what they were trying to do. So more text is bad. And this again was brought up in one of Mark Bernstein's many talks, that it just scales badly. It seems cool with 1 or 2 objects. When you got 150, no, you just can't read it. It's noise. But being able, for instance, to do things like the equivalent of a sort of hover, so where something like outside pop-up or something, that sort of interaction makes sense, because bear in mind, all these objects know what they are. We've got tons of information inside the environment digitally behind this object, so we can choose some kind of an interaction, a gesture that will allow us to bring forward the bits we want. We might want the title, we might want all sorts of other things, And that's definitely just something to explore, because I think that's really interesting. Once people get in the idea, okay, I'm pulling together stuff of interest. That interest may vary and move around even during a session. One moment you're thinking about who wrote this, another moment you might be thinking about, well, what's the general subject matter? What are the keywords here? So I think that's actually really exciting. And so it was really good to see people who'd been given no preamble to this, taking quite naturally to the idea that they were doing this sort of triaging task and making something that actually had resonance to them, rather than, in a sense, being told, as is often by the software, this is the things you're allowed to do, and if you don't do it right, you don't get anything at all. So that was quite positive. And I think at that point, I'll stop so people can ask questions.
Tess?
Yes. I'm wondering about the tendency people had to not want to do a lot of writing in this space, but to do it for research and creativity. And I wonder if that will change as generations who are this is going to be more intuitive to, and are going to use this for everything, much like certain people still prefer to read on a book than to read on a tablet. But the more it becomes part of our world, the more it becomes part of people's evolution as they're growing up, the less hang up they'll have about that. I mean, I know I like looking ahead, seeing what I'm typing on a keyboard physically. I think I could adjust to a VR space, but if this is all they know, or VR is all they know, XR, I wonder if that's going to be something that's going to change.
That's a great question. Of the 14 people that we tested, only 2 of them had ever really spent any time in a headset.
Yeah.
Right. And so those 2 were fairly younger, and they had no trouble. They were basically just flying through it, right? Took no time to walk them through this. But age is not just part of it. I mean, it's just how much experience do you have in a headset? Because I'm 71 years old and I'm totally comfortable in a headset. But to your point, young people have a better opportunity, or have more opportunity because of gaming, to be in headsets than somebody that is an academic, coming out of the humanities with books, or even the people that we were testing. I mean, there are people that, Mark Bernstein, who's been working in digital media probably more longer than any of us, right? And he understood what VR is. He's got it, but there were struggles that he had with that space, right? Jamie Bluestein, right? We didn't even finish Jamie's testing because he couldn't get it out of the headset. So so it really wasn't about age as much as how much time have they been in that headset. And so the question then is, if you're used to it, then reading is not hard, and it's not a bad thing. So over time it might get better. But the thing we're trying to do for Sloan is figure out, like, what are the next steps? What is it we're going to do next? And like I said, everything in academia is an incremental step. I know where I want to be. I'm already there.
Right.
But
I don't mean to, I didn't that it was about age. It's more about acclimation. And obviously, there's going to be more chance of acclimation as for people who are evolving since childhood with it. But obviously among us, I think I could get used to it in a sense that some of my peers couldn't, but that doesn't mean anything. Sorry, I just wanted to make that point, that I didn't mean to insinuate it was an age thing for any of us.
No,
Well,
it could, but you would think it would be. You would think it would
Yeah.
be, but it's not necessarily. It's really, how much time have you spent in a headset? How much time have you played? Have you gamed? Because it is
Yeah.
a game environment. I mean, there is a sense of play. I use the word play, and I think it offends people, but there is a sense of play, in that environment. I'm playing in the environment, right? Although I'm doing serious work. It's different. I mean, when I'm sitting here typing on this computer, it's fun. I love my work, but it's definitely not play. When I'm in that environment, that's play.
Yeah.
It does feel different.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's really interesting from a creativity standpoint.
Yeah, which is why I think it's a great creative space. And so where did
Yeah.
we move the ball forward? How many inches can we move it forward? And then also, just as we were thinking that this was going to take off, that VR was going to take off because the Apple Vision Pro was announced and everybody's all excited, AI came in. AI eclipsed the VR to the point where we now see glasses, and Apple has not moved forward with much work in the VR environment. And I would say that even at the Hypertext Conference, folks, hardly anybody was talking about hypertext. It was, it was, what does this have to do with hypertext? To the keynotes of the 3 keynotes, never use the H word. It's like, come on, give it to me. And the question, somebody said, well, what does that have to do with hypertext? Well, I didn't think about that. It's like, well, why are we here? I want to know how this connects. I love to talk about AI, but let's talk about AI in context of hypertext. That's the theme. What is VR in hypertext, right? Mark's paper, which I thought was brilliant, the spatial hypertext paper, that talked about the connection of what we're doing plus other things, right? It's beyond just, clicking. So how do you move the ball forward? Well, AI took it in a different direction, and we're still trying to catch up. That's the problem with VR right now. And then that's what I would also say in our Sloan report. The timing was weird. Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, because I just to go back to the thing about the print. I think a danger for, well, it's something, it's a challenge for us all, is thinking about this sort of stepping outside our preconception. So, for instance, if I'm someone who writes/types a lot, then where I do my typing sort of matters, because that's what I do a lot of. But what I was trying to stress earlier is the sort of thing that we were doing in this demo doesn't lend itself. It is sort of, well, it's different from the typing I might do, whether I'm a creative or I'm writing business, I'm writing work reports. So it might well be, and I think as Dene touched on, I might go into a VR writing space if that's something I'm comfortable with. Comfortable, I think, is the best term. In other words, it's just something that I prefer to do. The technology is getting there all the time, and we've seen in the last couple of years you can have Bluetooth keyboards and all sorts of things. So there are all sorts of ways to approach this. I think what's interesting is that one can have these different things. So I can have my different use cases. If I just want to go read a book sitting on a mountain, I can. That's a perfectly valid use of XR. But for instance, it wouldn't be how I want to use and find all text in XR. So I think it's there for all of us. We probably tend to approach this new environment as a sort of one-size-fits-all thing. But like many things, I think it wants to be used differently in different ways. And clearly where it yields value to people is where it does something that they can't do in their existing form. So, okay, I can sit on a train and type into something that's perhaps less cramped than typing on a laptop. If I don't have the headset, I could type with a laptop, or I could even write in a book. But what I can't do with a piece of paper is I can't do the sort of thing we were doing with this, essentially pulling out annotations or pulling out markers in many ways, because we weren't even really pulling realistic text out. A limitation of the source material we had and its failure to be malleable to a digital process meant that we were sort of, in a sense, playing at the exercise, and yet people found that really useful. Okay, this bit of this document has a resonance for me, and I want to mark that, and I'm going to take something that now is essentially a proxy for that thing, and then I can take it either into another sort of XR space, or I could take it out of XR into 2D. I could even just pick up a pencil and start writing, and I don't see those in opposition at all. So it's sort of counterintuitive, but I think the thing is to hold on to notions of what must be with much softer hands than perhaps we're used to in terms of the expectation of what this is going to give us. But I repeat the fact that I was really, really surprised given some of the sort of things we tripped over with the demo, actually quite how positive and actually how excited people were just by some of the things that happened. So thanks.
I think we talk about delight. Frode and I love the idea of delighting people. We saw some of that, in the experience, and that was good. And as I mentioned, when I showed this at the ELO conference back in July, people rushed up to me and wanted to play with the environment, which is great. So, Frode?
So much excitement. I just wrote a note to myself that I'll put in here. So as the creator of Author, which was in the Vision Pro on day one. I'll just speak a little bit for normal typing in XR. Because XR can replicate everything except, as Dene highlighted, and it's so important, the physicality of things. Author was okay. The very first version we had, you could type and you couldn't do much. That was it. It was a test version. You had a rectangle in XR. As Brandel would say, it was an utter waste of pixels in a good testing way, but it clearly isn't what XR excels at. There has been issues of what Apple has done since with the basic native OS presentations, which I think are quite awful, but that's kind of irrelevant. Point is, doing all the traditional things in XR, not a problem. It can all be done. We can have a Bluetooth keyboard, we can see it, which is really cool. And I think that will actually become more useful in the future because right now you do something really interesting on your laptop, press a button in the headset. Sometimes you might want to do that normal stuff in the headset anyway, and then click into XR mode. So being able to play with the different modes is going to be absolutely wonderful. And we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we should definitely design absolutely new experiences as well. So just a little side of that. And a really important thing, writing is very, very hard work to write properly. It uses very specific energy levels, very specific neural networks. That is what we need to support. There is so much stuff now. Like I'm a fan of TikTok, I admit it, I like it, but it's passive thinking, right? Driving a car now, you follow the blue line, it's passive thinking. Choosing what to watch in the evening, you don't even need to look at a schedule anymore. You go into Netflix or whatever, it's passive thinking. So to help with a lot of stuff Mark and Dene was talking about with academics, creating the systems that really make joyful, active thinking with knowledge will be absolutely interesting. Peter.
Okay, first off, I want to once again thank Frode for dragging me, kicking and screaming, slowly cajoling, gently nudging, and coaxing, and over time getting me inside of a headset. I really, up until I had one on, thought that I could imagine in my head everything in a headset because I've always had very strong 3D imaginative capability. Because when I was a little kid, I had literally a full three-dimensional model in my brain of all of the sets from Star Trek. So I could literally picture myself walking around on the bridge of the Enterprise, taking the trouble lift down, wandering and exploring the decks of the ship. And I have in the back of my head, a full mental model of the original Enterprise, and I can explore that just as if it was a VR environment. So I figured that okay, it's not going to be different in a headset than what I'm able to imagine in my head, but it really is. There's a wonderful ludic quality to it, and it opens a lot of doors that I wouldn't have seen just from trying to imagine what it would be like without having had the affordance of actually working in the environment. Thinking forward to the future, I'm excited about sort of a limited aspect of XR. And here's the use case that I see happening, not on the current hardware, we're not there yet, but maybe in a generation or two. And that's for empowering me to do better note taking when working with physical books. I want to be in the Japanese farmhouse, sitting down in that environment, watching the koi fish swim around. I want to have the physical book in front of me, and I want the system to either let me see the screen directly or generate a virtual representation of it by OCRing the page that's visible in front of me so that I can be flipping through the book and then using my finger to just like highlight a selection of the book to be taking notes in the physical book. Only I'm not using a highlighter marring the book, which is something I've never really been able to do in real life. As an undergraduate, I had a phase with the highlighters. First, I started with the yellow highlighter and I thought, well, this is good, but it could be so much better because they came out with colored highlighters. So then I came up with this crazy scheme where I had a blue highlighter, a red highlighter, a yellow highlighter, a green highlighter, and I was color coordinating what the highlights were going to be based upon the category of the thing that I was highlighting in the book. And I thought, oh, this is great for about half the semester until I realized that when I looked back at the books, they became utterly illegible because of bleed through of the markers and all. So I wouldn't do that. So ever since then, I've been a pristine book person as opposed to a physically annotated book person. And I know there's sort of like two classes of scholars. They're the ones who write on the pages, and then there are the ones who treat the book as a pristine object and can't bring themselves to write on the page. I fall in that later camp. But in an XR environment, I could freely be using a physical stylus that had no ink on it, just like a little round piece of plastic, and I could be writing in the margins of the physical book, not pressing on it to make sure that I don't dent the paper, but I could have the experience in a headset environment, augmented world of being able to write and mark up that book and have those notations be bound to the digital twin of the book so that I could consult them later, I could share them, I could swap one note to Frode. I could maybe ask it to overlay Mark Anderson's highlights with the page that I'm reading, and then I could see essentially his marked up copy of the book in front of me. And all those possibilities are so incredibly exciting. And if I hadn't been coaxed into the headset, I wouldn't have been able to recognize any of them. So, deepest gratitude.
Oh, Peter, we brought you over to the dark side.
Yeah, we're
Such a
so happy to hear that, Peter. On that note, I think it might be useful if I introduce some of the ideas we have moving forward. But on an aside, Peter, because of that, I'm going to mention something I'm trying to do externally to this, which is very relevant, and I think we can bring it in. One of the key things we're trying to do with XR stuff now is to take information in and out of XR. It is a third of what we're doing, metadata. So here's the thing. I found that journaling can be very useful, and I mean journaling not in the kumbaya yoga sense. I mean journaling as in, today I had a really good meeting with Dene. We talked about this, that, and the other. You know, writing kind of a captain's log, to use Star Trek language, right? But it's so boring, even for me who loves text, to write down. So what I'm trying to do is to have on my iPhone or my Apple Watch or whatever, a way to write quickly, walking down the street, press a button, because speech to text in an app, not talking to Siri or any of those things, is actually phenomenal now for that kind of writing, because it doesn't really waste sitting down space. Writing a proper document to you guys is an entirely different thing. So to really look at the flows of when speech to text is good, when you want to write, when you want to edit, will be phenomenally interesting. And finally, in addition to such a journal being accessible in and out of XR, Peter, the way you talked there, I was thinking maybe these things should be developed so that as you let's speak or write or whatever you do, if you take a picture of the document you're reading, that should be enough, right? So if you just extract some of the sentences in that book, Google will find the book for you. So you won't be able to annotate the page, but at least you will be able to free form speak stuff, and then it's associated with that later, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds good.
Mark, you said something about dyspraxia and then it disappeared. What was that about?
Oh no, I was just saying. Oh, that was a note. Just saying to say that people saying about typing. I mean, I have attempted, gosh, since my mid-20s to learn to touch type, but my hands don't go where my brain says. So that's why I'm rubbish at ball games and all these sort of things. It's basically mild dyspraxia, and it is absolutely persistently resistant to trying to learn to touch type. So it's not that I can't learn to touch type and learn which keys to press. It's my fingers don't want to press the right keys in the right order. So I'm much faster essentially with two, and I now have two arthritic fingers to show for it. But that was just a point made in passing. Two things I would pick up actually that I forgot to mention were interesting. They've sort of been touched on. One was standing. Two people, because because the space we had, there was a very large sort of atrium, so we were working there. All the tests were conducted standing. We didn't make a point of that. No one seemed to worry. But at the end, one person definitely said they felt that they said that they weren't particularly stable, and they sort of said they needed some sort of support, which led into conversation. Said, well, you could do this sitting down. And another person had, well, this is what also makes me think about, well, she described it as dyspraxia, but obviously burns through energy levels very fast. And so even doing a demo was sort of, this was long enough, I need to sit down now. So that was interesting. It just shows that you you sort of can't predict how things will go, and I think it reinforces the sort of the general premise of one size does not fit all. So this notion about whether you stand or sit, I think is should be approached not from our own personal prejudice about this and what we like, but thinking about the range of people who might use it and the places that might use it, which suggests that we just need to design in a way that both those are allowed for. The other thing was speech. Somebody, Dean, you'll probably correct me, I think it was Jamie Bluestein, when we were sort of trying to get, when we were trying to make the keyboard input, he said, why don't you use speech? He said, we're using it a lot in our lab. I thought, that's interesting. I mean, the thing is, well, we didn't go there because that's not where our focus was. But I did also think, that said, that speech is lovely for those for whom it works. And I have a fairly median English accent, but I'm sure I've heard a very strong, say, English regional accent. My experience of text to speech to text would be significantly different. So I think it's a really good idea, but I'm not sure it's as I don't want to avoid the inclusive word. It's not about intent. It's just actually just technically it's not there now. It's not as useful across the board as one of these is. And even if I was working with if I had limited movement thing and I was working with a rod attached to my forehead, I could still press these or press virtual ones in the space. So I think it's things like speech are nice and interesting, and it's certainly there to have as an extra affordance for those who can use it. But I would imagine at the moment, the base level, you certainly probably want to have some sense, even if only as a fallback, of some kind of keyboard type input. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Let me just respond to that. My students don't use their fingers very well anymore. They keyboard like this. So I suspect, I mean, I watch them type all the time. In all my classes are taught in a multimedia classroom with beautiful Macintoshes, and they want to work on their iPads and their phones because they want to type like this. They're not this. They use this when they're making an Illustrator file, but even then they're using iPads and tablets. So we might be thinking about how to move forward with even touch type on a more pad-like environment. So I'll stop there. Frode?
Yeah, thank you, Dene. That's really, really important. I mean, speech interferes with thinking in a different way than moving our hands. So sometimes speech to text, when it works, is great. Other times it's just not appropriate. And absolutely, my father, he also preferred to write on this because he could see the text immediately as he was typing it. So there's also that. And he was obviously not in the younger generation. So yeah, let's spend a few minutes and look forward. So what I'll do is I'll share screen with you guys a little bit. And I want to make it, hang on, I'll make you smaller. I want to make it clear what I'm showing you here. This is fodder for discourse in our community, but it's written as in we should do this. And even if Fabienne had many more hours, even if we all agreed, we couldn't do everything. So let me walk through this. And if you have a question or comment, don't be shy. Please interrupt me. I can't see hands on the side easily. So the first thing is, and this is to make it clear, this is to build on what we have, because we built a lot of things, a lot of which was shown in Chicago, but not everything. It's also to go slightly differently because we can. We need to look at different opportunities. So user starts on a Mac, has access to our book, clicks a button, goes into the headset, and the book appears. It appears in a room space as opposed to the plain space we have now. This will look like Peter's library or something like that. By the way, the base level device for this will be the Apple Vision Pro because that's what Sloan provided for us. It should, of course, work on other headsets, but we don't have to think about performance in exactly the same way, right? Spatial layout. You can have lots of things of this nature over there, other things over there, and then you should be able to change it. This is very, very traditional. This is the Star Trek holodeck. This is not new ways of looking at information. You can also have, let's say, maps imported. So you could have lots of your colleagues' name over on the wall, and you can interact with them to see items. So that's the general idea of the first room. And now we get to what we've talked about a lot before. And by the way, I have 5 single-minute videos to show you at the end of this. So if you can't visualize it, that's absolutely fine. A volume of the future of text that was imported is opened. The user interacts with it. I'll show you in detail what that is later. I've added this thing here while Mark was talking earlier, because in some cases, they're going to want to look at it like a PDF, but that is not where we want to go. That should be one option for a view. If you want to have it normally scrolling single thing, that should be possible. But if you want to have it paginated by sections, logical by headings, or something else, that should be possible too. So this is just a way of saying the text will have to have some sort of shape. But we as developers together in community must be able to explore many, many shapes. If somebody comes up with something crazy, if it's possible and Fabian likes it, we will try that too. We already have annotation. It's amazing. You know about it. It should be possible here. Dismissing the volume will be very, very important to make it small and put it away again. And then we got, unfortunately, I can see Mark here, so I'm expecting some grimacing here in the best possible way. There's a notion of having cards and notes. I will show you notes first. Notes is essentially the term that I'm using here for text and space. Notes is probably not a good word. I'm sure we'll think of something better. But in contrast to that, people should be able to create an index card, move it around, type on it if they want to, or speak, all of the stuff we just did, give a heading if they want, make a further card, minimize it, so that they can write longer thoughts if they want to. And then we go to the notes. Of course, we need to support 3D objects, different ways of connecting these bits of information. Ring menu, I'll show you the animation in a minute. You all know about it a little bit. And then we get to the specifically nerdy bit of leaving the headset. You should be able to exit with a configuration of the space. Something like using the ring menu or mana menu. I'm using specific language here, but to repeat for the nth time, that can change. Whatever system you copy as a volume, and then you can take it with you or you have it emailed, just like we have today, just like Dene and Mark did in Chicago. So there's different kinds of exits. You could be exiting with a PDF type thing that has added metadata. You could be leaving with just notes or with cards. And then really, really important, you need to be able to re-enter with that data. So it goes into a flattened thing that comes back out. So I'm going to skip down here to the work that I expect to do in order to support this. For instance, if you have been in the XR environment and you worked with notes in a map or topic configuration and copy that as a JSON, you should be able to paste it into a new document. Of course, I'm experimenting with Author. And that needs to be retained. So that in the map view of Author, in addition to XY coordinates, it has all this other stuff. Just as plain text, you go back in, it's there. That's really, really important. Any questions so far? Should be relatively obvious.
I just one quick observation in terms of the notes. I mean,
yep.
Just prove there's nothing new under the sun. You could do that in StorySpace in 1987.
Oh,
so we've
yeah. Sorry.
No. This isn't a correct. No, but I'm just. It's just a reminder. This stuff is sort of, in a sense, hiding there in plain space, and begging the question, sort of, why it's not been adopted. Because the only difference in the tool that I use every day is it's not constructed as a word processor, but I've been using Tinbox as my daily driver for since 2003. So I'm making notes all the time. It suits me because I discovered I'm a sort of hypertextual thinker. I think in small bits rather than long form, and I assemble long form when I need it. Yeah. It's a slightly different way, instead of starting with a big blank page and then writing bits all over it. But, you know, one size, we've said, one size does not fit all. But something that I think we're, in terms of sort of glossary and description, that we're still very loose, is in terms of what we mean by notes and labels and icons and all these sort of things. One thing that came out clearly to me from the testing was that people are actually very quickly quite happy with essentially an abstraction, whether it's just a bit of text or a shape or something. Both of them are essentially an abstraction of something else. In other words, they're not, even if it's a textual label, they're not really actually thinking about it as being text being more important than anything else. It's a representation of something, because, and that's good and important, because again, it came out in some of the papers we heard last week. You very, very quickly get overwhelmed if you try and treat things like a bunch of post-its, and basically try and actually keep all the writing actually at front of mind, because it just doesn't scale. It becomes actually harder, because now there's even more noise around the thing you're trying to read. So as you sort of, the number of things in the environment rises, it really benefits if you're able to pare it back. Now, you can always have, we've talked about sort of level of detail reveal, and there were a couple of comments up, or maybe you could lean into something that shows you more. All these things actually are really positive things to look at. I think the thing that's probably most counterintuitive to many people, though, is to start with this notion that less is more. Most people, yeah, I find that they start with thinking, no, surely I want everything, because it's important, because when I have one of these in front of me and they'll describe all the parts of it, surely I need all these things. Well, it turns out you don't. Our minds are actually pretty good about saying that thing up there is there because I put it there and I know it actually represents the whole book. Yeah, thanks.
I just want to respond to that. Most people looked at that environment and were confused because there was so much happening. So getting it down to just the essence would be very helpful. And so the first step I would take, if this was my project by myself, is only put the cards there and get rid of all that other stuff, right? That doesn't need to be there. I like the console being there to see how the data is going. That should not be in the testing for or in the final project, right? We know that shouldn't exist. Although people thought it was interesting that they could see it. So things like that. So just fine tuning, and I'll stop. Rhoda, you got your hand up.
Yeah, no, I just thought I would continue. So, Mark, I absolutely strongly agree that being able to manage your environment and not make it cluttered is absolutely a key thing. So this is the ring menu that we've been discussing for quite a while. And one of the things that we found in testing is that it's too easy to spawn. The idea is you select text and you pull out into a ring menu. So the notion here is that you would have a modifier of some sort, maybe twisting your hand or a second hand doing something. So in this basic example, the action should be that the selected text shown in the center here to be found in the full space that you're in. And the way it should be shown, the result, is by hiding other things, right? So the user here would, after selecting text and doing whatever needs to be done for this ring menu to appear, they would move their finger, the pinch up to find. Sorry, this video I'm actually talking, so that's why it's a bit slow. And on choosing that, that would then spawn another level where you would choose where to do the find, on the web, in the entire space, or in the volume, in the knowledge volume that you're dealing with. And then once you have chosen that, then you get the final option of how to display it by hiding others, pulling towards you, or showing the lines connecting it, right? So the notion of that is it's a bit convoluted, but it is step by step showing itself to the user. So the idea is then, sorry, I'm skipping ahead here, that what you actually get, if you were to see every part of it at the same time, it will be overwhelming. But this is the shape you would draw. So over time, you wouldn't have to look at the ring. You would just know that this is the shape to do that. And this is just an example. We'd have to build up a vocabulary. But the notion is you select any text, and here you would do this, and it does that complicated command. So it's an entirely new type of grammar. And it's really funny. I went through one of Fabian's early videos today, the one he posted to Peter, and he has almost this exact shape for something entirely different. So that was quite funny. The mana menu video is a lot shorter because I'm not showing so much. If we want to, we should not only decide what should be on the mana menu, we should look at how the user can be told what they are. Currently, things float in space. So we could do something simpler like have little dots with letters on them, or they could be icons. But once the user is familiar with that, there's no reason to keep it. We could have something maybe in the wrist, maybe in the palm of the hand, to toggle whether these icons are shown. Right. So these are not strong design directions. It is here to help us have specific arguments or discussions or what. And this is now going into.
Before we go further, hang on one second. Mark has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Mark, I didn't see.
I'm moderating. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please. Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, no, it's about the mana menu. I was just thinking, because that's one of the things we found, and again, this is not sort of critique of the build kind of thing, but we found that, of course, having a persistent menu actually got in the way, because as you're moving your fingers around, all the stuff attached to it was there. But what I was going to comment on was this thing about a sense of the degree to which you show things or you hide them in terms of the richness of the menu. I think what I'm taking away from this is we actually, rather than say, we'll make it later, we'll make it so you can do that, I think you want to approach it from a design point that all these things are malleable. I think, in other words, it's doing the dog food from the get-go to say, well, this needs to be here and to not be here, and we need to address the presentational problems of that as we start. Otherwise, we fall into the age-old trap that we've built something, and then it turns out the thing we wanted to do as well turns out to be harder. Anyway, I just parked that there because that's another sort of thing that came up from the testing. Thanks.
And it's a very important point, and we need to do this obviously in concert with Fabienne as to level of involvement of complexity. So here's the volume. So this is a big deal. Now, my 3D skills are not the best in the world. So imagine this volume not being a cube you can't see inside. Because first, what I'm trying to indicate here is a gesture to rotate it. So you put your hands out in space and you do this to rotate it around this. Right? You may have to do something else to make that happen, but this was actually Jonathan Finn inspired this, because he said a big gesture to do a big thing. Right? I thought that was really nice. If you want to move a big thing, you do this. You don't do this. So it kind of maps logically. Similarly, if you want to scale it, maybe what you do is you pinch upwards or inwards. Right? Again, things to test, other suggestions very welcome. So this is what we talked about for a while. And I decided that the illustration should be much closer to what Mark has been talking about. We have as little as possible in here, but each one of these planes going back in space represents a different year in this configuration. So we don't show the big articles like that. That is way too much. So on each plane, like this is Future of Tech 6. So that would be this year, everything would be on that plane and so on, right? And I'll skip ahead a bit. And at the back, that could be a list of topics that we've manually put together that would help organize where these documents are in space. So then the kind of a cool bit, if you decide to scale the thing so large that it envelops you, I think that would be really quite magical. So you do that. Now we're inside it. That's where you can have the semantic zooming of now these things should be allowed to appear automatically as front page, whether scrolling or whatever, but providing enough information you can read something about it. Any thoughts on that?
One of the things I was thinking about is, because if we're going to have more than one cube in that space, so imagine we have like the Hypertext 24, Hypertext 25, and they're out there twirling in space. It'd be nice to be able to grab the cube and bring it towards you, and then put your hand in, right? The problem is, once you put your hand in, is it going to be easy to see those documents? So how can we recognize the document we want when they're in that space and they're small?
I think those are our research questions. I think we should look at, by default, I'm wondering if maybe 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters is the size of these things. So that should allow you to have, surround yourself with them and to do what you're talking about, Dene, so you do pull in. And I have no idea about the scaling of this. Tess, your hand was a bit hidden. I finally now saw it.
No, that's okay. I just, I love this. It's just purely whimsical, my reaction to it, but it feels like being in a museum installation. I feel like I'm walking around in a museum of articles and a museum of works, and I'm picturing what that might be like. And I think if we're talking about helping people's creativity and how do we help people actively think, this would put me in a really interesting space that I would love being in. And I think that I had an idea earlier when we were talking about people writing in it in this space. And like, what if when you finished writing, like a little book appeared that you've written this much of the book that, like just little things of whimsy that we could possibly do in this thing that would just sort of, like as we say, gamify, make it more play. This to me is just delightful. It's not nothing technical. I just find it a delight.
Well, that's really, of course, lovely to hear. Just a little bit of response to that. The cube, the issues Dene raised are really important because we have no clue now, which is why we need to build these in tests. And also the difference between having some kind of organization versus having freedom will come into this. Like what happens if you want to read one of these papers? Can you pull it out? Do we leave it kind of a ghosted version behind? All of these stuff we need to start playing with. So yeah, good points. Mark?
Yeah, no, I like this, except the one thing that I would urge to get away from is stop using pages. I'll get back to what we said before. These are actually not helpful to us. One of the things we found when I was working with Fabian to get some stuff ready, we found out that very few papers in the ACM set we have images, and even fewer have pages on the front page. So actually, if you had 40 pages representing papers, you just have 40 things that look like one another, now taking up a lot of space and not giving you much. Whereas maybe the shape or the color or a combination of those could be giving you a really powerful insight into that. Because bearing in mind with what was just shown, you can't read the text in that.
Well,
and this goes. Well,
you're making a categorical statement. I completely agree with you that having a page as such is not necessarily useful. But the notion here is, because you've talked quite a lot about colors and shapes and stuff, really, really important to do that, 100%. All I was meaning to show here is if you make this really massive, right, you're inside the thing, that might be a time where a significant more amount. These are not meant to be PDFs necessarily. I'm just a bit of a lazy artist.
No, I get that. And I wasn't trying. All I'm saying is, and I suspect you need to make. Essentially, you're going to have to make the text really big, because that's one of the early things I found when we first started using Oculus. I mean, you have to stand where the focus is. So having things far away don't really help you unless they're really enormous, and then they're so enormous they're just getting in the way. So again, it seems counterintuitive, but trying to use text, specifically red text, as your way into this sort of display,
Mark,
is not generally as helpful as we would assume. That's the point I'm trying to get across.
I agree with you. This is definitely going to be a fun thing for us to experiment with. I would just like to additionally add something. I don't know if you've all seen Soft Space by Julie, who presented to us. The notion is, in his world, you make a fist one hand, and then the other one you pinch, you move the entire room, right? So that's something we could have here too. If you want to read that thing in the back, you just pull the whole room towards you and so on. Dene, please.
Yeah, I was going to say what was really interesting was people were very interested in the red line going to the words that they had pulled out, extracted from the text, and being able to move that around and actually see the connection between the words they chose and the text itself and the grayed out. That was very helpful. And as Mark mentioned earlier, the next question is, okay, what happens if I go to the next page? What happens to those links?
Yeah.
So that's something we have to work out intellectually before we actually design that, right? So what do we want to happen to the hypertext, to the words that are extracted? And the word extract is better than the word highlight. That was much closer to what they were doing, and they understood that better.
That's really, really important. And thank you for mentioning that now. Managing links and how we view links will be a whole new field of spatial hypertext investigation. Absolutely. Now, this is the thing I could imagine some of you might bristle at. This is notes. This is fine. No one's going to hate this. This is obvious. You write in space, right? You do a double tap or whatever gesture works, and then you write something like this, or you speak or whatever. You can then pinch and move it as we have, but as we've learned last week, we need to improve what that is. Absolutely crucial. We'll have to do that first, just like Dene said. And then we'll have another kind of gesture or double tap to add a note. And I've made the note here in the most boring possible way. It's a rectangle with a done button. Not at all suggesting it should be that. Hopefully you will have much better ideas. But the idea is you can have just plain text, or you can have plain text with stuff behind it, right? The thinking here is also with the ring menu, like you see, I used the example of Vint Cerf here because he is in the kind of script that's in the document. The idea would be to select Vint Cerf and then do that quick gesture that you saw earlier. And now I can see any document in the space that mentions Vint Cerf through a line, or hiding everything else, or bringing it to me. So all of these become interactive like that. And like Dene was talking about managing those lines, maybe now I want to pin Vint Cerf over here. So that becomes a reference point to these things. This is, once we start building, we can have fun with that. Mark, please.
Yeah, just a very quick thing, seeing the box appear there is, I finished up my talk this week with the review, the McLuhan review mirror thing, because it's so true. And one thing that will help us a lot is if the faster we can break this metaphor of paper cards and pages and things, I think it will be to our benefit. One of the reasons being that there's something, again, I watched when people were working the demo, was that what they enjoyed was being able to escape that formula. And some of them, because that's not what they do, were quite surprised to realize that even this little thing they were looking at was just the sort of the sharp end of a vast amount of information that was there at their fingertips, although they couldn't see it / read it. So I think getting people to understand that essentially they're just interacting with a knowledge object, and moving away from this page card metaphor would be remarkably helpful to people, because we're not going to be, I'm surrounded by books, I love them, but we're not going to be doing that forever. And the more complex our information spaces become, the less space we'll have for having lots of cards and things sitting around.
Yeah,
thanks.
I think that's an absolutely fair comment, but I would like you to tell me what you mean by that in writing so we can build it, because I agree. What I've gone through here is try to take what we have and put it into kind of a narrative. I'll show you this one and then I'll stop sharing so we can have a better discussion. But when you talk about having, like the example of spheres, that is absolutely valid, but we need to get that in a more realizable form to figure out that. I do think that we will always have rectangles for some writing, but absolutely we should escape it for a lot of writing. Like Adam Verne in the very beginning of this, he wrote, on splines and so on. Absolutely important, and we should do that also. Anyway, this one is really quite brief, but this is the writing on cards. This is accepting a hybrid future and what it is now. Maybe do a pinch and pull out. That creates a card because you pull out diagonally. Maybe it can go to any size. Maybe it snaps to certain sizes so you feel you know what you're going to get. And then, surprise, surprise, well, you can move it. Maybe we have bars on the side, instead of the one box. This is something Dene brought up in the beginning. Where should the drag handles be? And maybe they should appear only on pinching, maybe not. Maybe they need to be visual more. To make a subsequent card, instead of having to do cards in space, maybe you pull it out. Or what am I doing here? Oh, yeah. This is how you type or speak. You put it in the box. And that will... So note that the idea here is when you write this and you export it to the external world, they can be linearized and handed in as a normal paper, but they should retain their spatial properties so they can always go back to this. So this is the notion of pulling out another card. And very importantly, as we talked about a few times, that card is now in the way. So I want to make that smaller. So I do a double tap type pinch at the top and it collapses it into just the first sentence or the heading or whatever, something like that. So not rocket science. It is these animations, and I'll share the PDF when Dene and I have gone through it a little bit more with some of these ideas. And it really is a starting point for discussion. Dene, is your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, I something that Fabian said in the chat, and I agree with him. One of the things that bothered me as I was watching the 14 people test this is that they were moving this stuff around like it was paper. And I'm thinking, we're in this really cool space where there's volume. There's nothing has to be flat. Wouldn't it be really great if we actually had volume with these objects, not objects? And so one of the things we did with Rob Sweigert's project, when we did the VR portal project, there's a lot of text that needed to be in that game. The game is very textual, right? So how do you put text in an environment where people are going to read it, right? That was the big question. So we're able to create these panels that you could open up like this and expand, turn around. They would hover in space and turn like little boxes, little rectangular boxes. And then you can put them off to the side and pull up another one, right? So we're doing this as you're reading. And every time you would read, not only were you reading it, but you could have the option of having it read with you. You can have it read to you with voice, right? So some sonic intervention. The environment had ambient sound. That was the other thing I heard from one tester last week was, can there be sound in here? And there's, yeah, we could have some ambient sound that doesn't interfere too much with our thinking. So, we need volume, and it doesn't make sense to have PDFs. It makes more sense to have these objects, when you take out of the cube, are themselves have some sort of thickness to them. Use the depth of the environment more.
100%, 100%. And it's really nice how we sometimes polarize each other here in discussion. I think that's very, very useful. We all want to have richly spatial thinking environments and communications environments. We also want to onboard people. My kind of dream would be to take in a PDF that looks completely boring and flat, and then magic, suddenly it's spatial, right? So that is just really, really important. I should be able to just tear it up. But we can also, I don't mind entirely forgetting and foregoing the PDF world, absolutely. And then we get into really, really exciting things of layouts. Like some of us were discussing earlier, a layout of a book that I thought was beautiful. It has a lot of white space. In print, that's heavy. It may be wasted digitally, but it can also be beautiful and easier to read. The whole point of the view spec that particularly Mark and I have been talking about for quite a while, it has to be controlled by the author and the reader. Ted Nelson goes back to God the author and God the reader. We can do that now in an entirely new ways. So all I meant to do with this brief stuff is to give you a lot of stuff to disagree with. So when you say we should do more of this or more of that, that's the whole point of this thing. So when Dene says the text should be more dimensional, absolutely it should. Tess.
I wonder that in addition to the utilizing the uniqueness of the space and making something that looks really different and interesting with a cube, like what functionality we can put into it too, as a, if it's not going to be a two-dimensional index card, if it's going to be something we can turn, then what functionality can we put into that?
That is so. Are you finished? Because I don't want to interrupt you.
Yes. Okay. No, that's what, yeah.
Many, many years ago at Starbucks, where I met my wife, I was working at a project called Synapse, CY, Synapse as in cybernetic synapse. And the notion there, this was a precursor to hyperwords, where the text was actually a tumbler. So if you imagine metal type, but printed like this and this, so it became like a roller, right? So the idea is any text you can rotate and it'll show different aspects of itself, right? I'm not saying we should do that here, but to infuse dimensionality absolutely everywhere, of course we should try that, right? There's nothing wrong with looking at the back of something and it is something else, right? There's nothing, but then we're in the artistic fun side of this, and then we get back to the how do we let people know? Maybe we don't. Maybe some of this is Easter eggs. Maybe some of this is for expert users only. That's fun. That might be the right thing. Maybe next time, maybe Mark and I do the testing in London, let's say, there are some things that we fixed based on last week, but let's say it turns out that there's some things that, Dene said this magic should happen. If the user doesn't get it, who cares? I would agree with that in some cases. That's going to be the fun.
Maybe it's customizable, maybe if I'm making notes, maybe I want one side to just be keywords. So I know to go back to it or something. Images.
Customizable, absolutely. And also levels of involvement, right? Someone who doesn't care so much, you'll be able to go in, write some stuff, put it here and there, fine. Someone like Dene, who's passionate about the artistic side of this, should be able to literally twist the words to her will. The fact that someone else doesn't know how to do that doesn't bother me. I know how to use Photoshop. Mark knows how to use Storyspace better than me. There's nothing wrong with having experts for different ways of using it, but it shouldn't be a barrier to the basic person coming in doing the basic stuff. And this is the kind of thing I hope we can really fight over in the best possible way. Not just politely say, oh, I don't know about this, but really with a huge smile say, I want to be able to do this with the text. Or right here, Mark, one of my closest collaborators since 2016, when he says he doesn't want more text, I actually agree. But we have to figure out what that means, because we're not going to have a room full of smileys only the whole time. No one is saying that. Right? But if we don't have this push and pull, we're not going to get something useful. So now we have this amazing real world testing last week. We've had a really good back and forth today, and all of these things get documented. And now is a really good time for you to do back of the napkin and share it with us so that when Fabian starts building out, we do different kinds of things. We have to go beyond the obvious. And most of what I presented today was pretty obvious.
Bye. I got to go to my other meeting.
Oh yeah, it's 3 minutes too. See you later, Dene.
No,
Welcome back
it
from
went by
Chicago.
so fast. Bye, everybody. Good to see
Bye.
you.
Bye, Dene. Take care.
Oh yeah, we got a. Yeah. Is there anything from the chat? We all got to go. I have a few things here. Mark, please, you have your hand up.
Please, can we be shown a diagram next time that doesn't involve rectangles? Just a small design challenge.
No, because it's not for me to do the next design. It's up to you. Ha ha ha.
I'm not a designer. I don't draw. So I mean, so you can't. I can't fix that. But I genuinely mean the reason I say it is just try it. Because if one always falls back on the same paradigms, for instance, we talk about doing things differently in space. Most of what we're talking about, you can do in tools today. It's just a glob of data. The people who I see making real progress and power this are those who understand that this thing that I'm looking at, be it a box on a screen or something floating in space, is just a representation of what lies beyond it. So a lot of things we talk about are actually quite pedestrian. I think to unlock the power of this, we need to start thinking about the interrelation of the parts rather than making cards.
Because we're running out of time. What I currently call notes, I'm sure we'll have a better term, is just text in space, right? I completely agree. We should be able to make things smaller. Now, one of the things you really pushed, and I'm very glad you have, is maybe we take this article and we scrunch it down so it becomes a silver sphere, and this one becomes a green sphere. That can have real meaning because to you, that is an annotation to change the shape. Absolutely agree. So in order to discuss that further and to get it towards making it, even just write it out in a sentence like, I want to be able to turn it into whatever, talk about it for a few minutes, we go back and forth. That would be really, really useful, especially, and the more, and I'm not talking to Mark because you know what you mean by this, but if someone else has an idea they think is, let's be honest, kind of stupid, we would really, really like to hear that. I mean, Carl is here. He hasn't been here for a while. I'm very grateful. He has a lot of experience with gestures, interactions, and stuff. He might have something very off the wall in one thing. All of you here have very specific understandings of different things. We need to get them in now. And yes, Mark, I will think about non-textual text, and I'll see what I can do. And any other questions or comments? No, Mark, it is not a fear of not using rectangles. Most of what you saw today had no rectangles.
1 o'clock.
It was just text in space. The one thing that had, well, two things. One is a document that's imported. When you make it big, you can read it. And the other one is what I call cards. I'm not even saying we have to implement the cards, but I'm saying that for logical completeness of a design, they need to be considered. If we end up doing everything with really well-polished, what I currently call notes, let's find a better name to repeat that. That's not a problem, right? If we only write windsurf, you can collapse that into a star and you expand it, you have more. That would be great. No one is arguing, Mark, that this needs to be a rectangular environment. And
I think the challenge is to actually do this and set ourselves the challenge of not using any of the print paradigms. It won't. I mean, the point is to deliberately see what is it we actually need to hold on to, some of which we will, and what is it we're doing out of sheer familiarity and an atavistic sense that this is how it is. And I don't think we've properly scraped the bottom of that barrel yet.
So scrape. I look forward to hearing more scraped notions of getting to the next paragraph. paradigm. That was an interesting slip. Okay, have a good week, everyone. Thanks for today.
Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye. Take care.